Hi everyone, welcome to the overview video for Unit 5, and the big theme for this unit is understanding. So up till now we've been talking a lot about technology, and now we're going to switch gears and we're going to talk more about reading and writing and try to bring those two together. So this unit begins on March 10th, runs through April 6th. You'll notice it's a little bit longer than some of our other units because spring break is in the middle there, and nothing is due during spring break. So take a break, enjoy yourself, but we'll have to get back to it pretty soon after that because we are really moving towards the end of the semester at a pretty fast pace. Right now, at the March 11th point, we are halfway through the semester, and I know the second half is going to go by even faster than the first half. So in Unit 5, we'll be talking about information, procedural, and argumentative texts, which probably aren't new to you. We'll be talking about some sources of quality print and digital texts that you can use to teach these different text types. And we'll be really zooming in on the idea of close reading and how that applies to the kinds of texts that students are typically reading when they're doing an inquiry project or when they're looking for information to share with others. You will be defining the kinds of texts, identifying quality sources, describing factors that influence comprehension, and thinking about vocabulary and comprehension strategies for these different kinds of texts during this unit. The big idea here is that comprehension leads to understanding, whether that is print or digital text. So there are definitely similarities to the processes that we use when we're reading either of those types of texts, but there are also some unique comprehension strategies to consider when students are reading digital text, because not only do they have to understand what is said in the words and the images like we do with the print text, but with a digital text, they also have to be able to find the text if we're reading on the web and navigate through the text and avoid the distractions that are inevitably there when kids are reading with technology. So think of it like extra layers of complexity that accompany the process of reading digital texts, and we'll focus on those during this unit. So you're going to start off reading chapters 9 and 10 in our text, and doing some reading about close reading. So in the module for Unit 5, actually it's not in that module, in a separate module, there is a collection of articles about close reading. And when you open that, you'll see lots of different articles. You're just going to choose one that sounds interesting to you. And so you'll be reading that. You'll also be viewing one of the videos about close reading. So you can choose which one seems to be the most applicable to you. My favorite one is the first one, Information Text by Nell Duke. She's a friend and a colleague and a extremely well-respected researcher in the area of reading comprehension. But I'll tell you, it's a little bit longer than a couple of the other videos. But you choose what you think is going to be the best one for your learning needs, and you'll match that with the article that you read. So you pick one article, pick one thing to view, and then you'll be kind of combining those into a summarizing activity, and you can read about that activity in the assignments module. But it's intended for you to think more deeply about close reading, specifically with informational and opinion / argumentative text, and thinking about the kinds of text that your students are reading. You'll indicate which article and which video you chose. You'll summarize your learning, and you'll give a personal response. And you can read more about exactly how to do that in the assignment description. Also in this unit, we'll be having a discussion board. As before, you can choose between the discussion board or the live chat. The live chat is on April 5th at 8 p.m. Just a heads up, that is the night before part 3 of your inquiry project is due, and I'll be talking about that here in just a little bit. So, you know, If you're a person who's a last minute person, you may be working on that inquiry project on April 5th, so you might need to make adjustments for what you're going to choose for participating in the discussion. Our two topics are reading strategies for ebooks and e-textbooks. So what is it that's different about reading ebooks and e-textbooks, and how do we prepare students to be able to get information from those formats of sources? And then we'll also talk about what it means to make notes. And I know that's something that lots of students struggle with. Lots of teachers face the challenges of preparing their students to make notes. So those are our topics. Plan ahead for when you're going to participate. Now, the third thing that you'll be doing in this unit is the part 3 of your inquiry project. And this is where you actually write the paper. So be sure that you're allowing yourself enough time. It's approximately a month from now, which, and I'm saying now is March 10th when the Unit 5 is open, available. And so you have a good month to write that project. This is what you would typically think of as a research paper. You can read the assignment description for the kinds of things I'm expecting, but be sure that you allow yourself enough time to do that well. And so you should have your resources because you submitted those with part 2. But as you're working, if you decide that you don't have quite what you need and you want to use additional resources, or you looked at something and you found out, oh, this isn't what I thought it was, you don't want to include it. You don't have to stick with that same reference list that you prepared for part 2, but you do have to include a reference list with part 3. So it may be a little bit different than it was in part 2. And your reference list that's included in part 3 should be revised. So if I give you feedback on your list that you submitted for part 2, you should make those changes with part 3 and include that in your paper. Now, I've been expecting APA style on those references. I'm not a big stickler for APA style on other aspects of the paper. For instance, I don't expect you have an abstract. I'm not concerned if you have a running head. I'm not too concerned about what the title page looks like. You are welcome to use the APA style on those things, but those things are easy. It's the references and the citations that people struggle with. So I don't really focus on I see those as extras. If you were going to submit a paper to be published somewhere, you would have to have those things. But I want you to master those references and citations. So I don't really care either way if you include the extra things, the title page, the abstract, the running head, those things. I'm not really worried about that. If you know how to do that and you want to, great. If you don't spend your time figuring that out. Spend your time making sure that your references and your citations are just right. So this paper is where you're making your best attempt to answer your inquiry question. Please do put that question at the top of your paper. And please do write this using formal writing. So no contractions, not informal language, but more of a formal professional type of language. Now, you may discover as you're working that you aren't able to exactly answer your inquiry question. That's perfectly fine. That question is your guide. My goal is that you're learning. So as long as you've learned some new things, don't worry too much if you can't find the exact answer to that inquiry question. Do your best. I find it helpful when writing a project like this to include headings in your project because that breaks up the information into smaller chunks, and I would like to see some headings. You could use a question as a heading or just a phrase. A couple of words are fine, but I do want you to include headings to break up that information and make it a little bit easier to manage. Okay, one thing that trips people up a little bit when they're writing the paper part of this project is when they have to cite things within the paragraphs. So what I want to point out to you are a couple of things here. I do talk about these on the APA style tutorial, but I just want to give them as reminders right here. If you're using a direct quote, and you must first of all put that in quotation marks, you must include the name of the person saying the quote and the original source where the quote comes from, including the page number. If you don't have that information, you should think twice about including that quote. If you are finding the quote on a website, instead of the page number, which you can't really give a page number to a website, if it's information that's a part of the website, it's not a published article that first appeared in print, but now you find it on a website, it's actually part of the website text. Then instead of the page number, you can put in parentheses lowercase n and lowercase p with a period after each for no page. That suffices for the lack of page number found on a website. But otherwise, you must have that page number, and if you don't have that, do not use that as a direct quote. The second thing that I really want to stress is the citation of ideas. If you're borrowing an idea from someone else, you're not using a direct quote, but you're taking kind of that main idea and then you're expanding on it in your writing, you need to include a citation. A citation is also used if you're including any kind of fact in your paper. So a citation is the short version of what you would put in your reference list. So it's just the author's last name and the year, and no website links, nothing like that. And what the citation is like a shorthand note, so that if I wanted to know more about that idea, I could flip to the back of your paper and find that exactly on the list of your references and figure out where to go to find that information. So that's what you include in your citation. Every citation that's in your paper must be listed in your references. Everything that's in your references must also appear in the body of your paper. So if you have a source that you've kind of read, but you haven't really linked it to any key idea in your paper, it's not listed in your references. The citations, like the quotes and the citations here on this slide, must match what's in your references. No more, no less in either spot. If you're struggling, I would direct you to that Purdue OWL website that I have shared before. Just a reminder, as I've already started looking over part 2 of your inquiry project, just a reminder for the APA style in your reference list at the end, be sure that you're following the correct way to list the author's names. You're noticing where I have periods on these examples. You're noticing where I use a capital letter and where I do not use a capital letter on the title. You're noticing my use of italics, my use of the colon, my location of the publishing, the city or country where the publishing company is located, the placement of the publishing company's name. On the second example here, notice I have a journal, and so you see again where I'm using capital letters and where I'm not using capital letters, and you're noticing how the journal title is written, the use of capital letters, italics. You see how I'm listing the issue number and the volume number and the page number. So I've reviewed those already. I just want you to look really carefully because all of those things are important in making that list accurate. A couple of questions that have come up about websites, and so I include a couple of website examples here. The first one is an article retrieved from a periodical that's online. So that's a web magazine, a web newspaper, something that publishes articles on the website on a regular basis. And so you'll see here that the date of that article is listed, and notice how the date is listed, not the typical way we write a date. Notice the use of capitals in the title of the article and the use of capitals, which is different in the title of the journal or newspaper or whatever the online publication is. And the use of italics. Notice how I listed the web address. No date is included. That's the previous version of APA. You might still be working in that version, but we're in the 6th edition right now, and the 6th edition does not call for a date when you're listing a website address. Notice the Scholastic reference here. And it is a report, so it's a website, but it's more of a static kind of website. certainly some things do change on the website, but they don't typically publish new things on a daily or weekly basis. So you'll see here also, I wanted to include this one because there's not a person listed as the author. And if you find website information and you can't find a person as the author, it's the website publisher who is listed as the author, as I've done here with Scholastic. And then I've listed the report or whatever the title is of the, I don't want to call it an article because I don't want to imply that it's published daily or weekly, but whatever the text is that you found on that website, it typically has a title to it. And so that's where you would list that title. And then again, you have the URL. And I already see a mistake that I made in this title. I did not put it in italics, and it should be in italics. So I apologize for that. So only one thing in your reference list, in each of the references, only one thing is in italics. So if you're ever in doubt, it's only one thing, and it's usually the publication or kind of the bigger thing, not the little article, but the bigger thing that is in italics. So hopefully that gets you a kind of a quick review of that APA list. Remember, you can fix those things when you turn in part 3 of your inquiry project. And we're off and running on Unit 5. I hope that it turns out to be a good unit for you. Take care, and we'll be in touch later.